Summer is often a sleepy time for fashion and people go away on holiday and brands tend to not announce so much because they know no one's looking at the news. And that's fine, I get it, we all need time to recharge. But it's finally September and we should channel that back to school energy by diving into what fashion has been up to this summer and catching up on what brands have been sneakily doing whilst they thought our eyes were turned. So I've rounded up the 5 biggest stories I think happened over this summer. I hope you have your pencil sharpened and your new notebooks ready, besties, because class is in session. Okay, before we get into the first topic, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Katie. I do a lot of videos putting fashion into various contexts and talking about sustainable fashion and how we can fix the industry. If that sounds good to you, then you might want to subscribe to the channel and you might want to follow me on all my other social medias. I'd love to see you there. And okay, with that, first topic. Princess Polly got B-Corp. So I guess we're giving that to whoever now. The first fast fashion brand to be awarded a B Corp is a pivotal moment. Pivotal in that B Corp has solidified their complicity in greenwashing for fast fashion by certifying a company that barely even tries to convince people it's sustainable. I mean, I was scrolling through their website and I just had to laugh at this about section I found that sounds absolutely nothing like a brand that's been certified sustainable. They've managed to promote the TikTok trend cycle, romanticize hyperconsumption, need it now mentality, admit to daily drops of clothing, and brush over the environmental impact of clothing returns, all in one paragraph. Alden Wicker straight up called this out as greenwashing based on sustainability vibes rather than facts. A lot of people are saying that B Corp has kind of jumped off the deep end with this one and taken out years of building up their credibility and position as the #1 sustainability certification for consumers just in one move certifying one brand. I would kind of argue with this by saying that B Corp has faced a lot of heat recently for certifying a lot of problematic brands. And to me, this feels less like a bad decision from B Corp and more like a very public example of B Corp's questionable standards. Obviously, this is going to have major implications for B Corp. It's also going to have major implications for fast fashion. Now that one of their own has been certified, it's likely we're going to see a ton of other fast fashion brands trying their luck at getting the same certification. I mean, why wouldn't they? We were actually taking bets on my Instagram channel about whether Shein had already started applying before they saw this news, or they literally dropped everything and rushed to apply as soon as it came out. Okay, speaking of Shein, moving on to our second topic, and I guess our first piece of good news. They had a pretty bad summer, and the French government is majorly to blame here. France hit Shein with a $47 million fine for deceptive pricing and greenwashing, before tacking on an extra $1 million fine for failing to comply with microplastic labeling laws, and then slapped them with a €150 million penalty, all over cookie violations on their website. I'm not sure if someone was counting that and converting the euros and the dollars into one big amount, but it's a lot. Italy also chucked in their $1 million fine for greenwashing because at this point, why not? But like I said, France is the MVP here. They're literally campaigning to get Shein delisted online at an EU-wide level. And they've almost passed their own law, effectively trying to ban them from their country, which actually included a clause about advertising from influencers. And this is really, really interesting. And I did a whole video on this. So if you want to hear more on that, then go watch it after. And I think it's going to be pretty important, so I recommend you do. So compared to France, everywhere's been a little bit more low-key, including the UK, but we have all but banned them from listing here on the London Stock Exchange after years of Shein trying to list here. And at this point, they've kind of given up and just gone to Hong Kong, which was plan, I think, C, maybe D in their long list of IPOs. And I know IPOs can be a bit of a snooze fest. I'm normally not interested, but it has been really interesting to see Shein get rejected by this many stock exchanges, especially since for a while it looked like the UK were going to allow them in and our MPs seem to be courting the company. But it looks like the UK is going to be switching sides. Now it's come out that Shein was apparently moving a massive amount of their income over to Singapore to avoid paying UK tax. Maybe the UK will get on this lawsuit train, I don't know. But it's definitely been a hard summer for Shein, and I bet they were glad to see the end of it. Although September came and a fresh scandal has rocked the boat. This time it's a little bit more scandalous than the cookies and greenwashing, because apparently a £7.50 t-shirt that Shein was selling has gone viral and since been taken off the website because it was modeled by an AI version of Luigi Mangione. This caused so much outrage that Shein immediately put out a statement saying they were launching a full investigation. But yeah, just add it to the list of PR disasters. Okay, so topic 3, probably one of my favorite ones. This summer had everyone asking the same question: what makes a fast fashion brand? And if you're not new to this channel, you know we've been talking about this. And it's really heartening to see a few conversations happening this summer talking about how brands that we might not perceive as fast fashion are actually engaging in fast fashion practices. This kind of started with the odd Muse is it fast fashion debate that took over TikTok and sparked so much online talk. People questioning why the brand calls themselves a slow fashion brand, how much polyester they're using in their designs, and some questions over their supply chain. I'm not quite sure this has made it across the pond. I had a few American subs saying they hadn't heard of the label when I put up a poll asking people's opinion on whether it was fast fashion or not. But it has been pretty big over here in the UK where Odd Muse was founded, and it's had a lot of blowback. The founder Amy has had multiple moments of going viral online about this backlash and responding to it and speaking of unfair hate for her label. But it does also seem like she's engaging in some of the comments and she's taken some of the feedback on board, and the brand has started to talk more about their working conditions and supply chains and talking about transparency and why they use so much polyester. And all of this is obviously really good. The more information we have on a brand, the better. But I think opinion is still quite mixed on whether it is fast fashion or not. Ever since this happened back in May, it's kind of sparked more conversations throughout the summer. Like, for example, is Uniqlo fast fashion? Has also been asked a lot this summer. And to be honest, I am a little bit more confused on this conversation than I am Odd Muse. Maybe confused isn't the right word, but I think it's quite clear that Uniqlo has got a reputation of designing for longevity, but the number of garments they produce and the supply chain issues they've had and their polyester usage all kind of speak for themselves, I feel. I also put this on my Instagram story and the opinion was not very divided. It was quite clear. A lot of people do agree that Uniqlo is fast fashion, but there also is a general sentiment, which I think skews the perception a little bit, that Uniqlo is better than other fast fashion and therefore maybe in a different category. And I think that's really interesting. Anyway, to cap off the summer of questioning fast fashion, we're kind of going to go over to luxury because Loro Piana was the latest LVMH brand to be put under court administration for their sweatshop-like conditions in Italy. And at this point, I don't understand why we're not putting the entire conglomerate under administration and conducting an investigation across all of the businesses, because at this point, it's a very clear pattern. Anyway, the news about Loro Piana has kind of fed into this what constitutes fast fashion debate as well. And I think the whole entire crux of the issue is that we don't have a standardized definition for what fast fashion is. I do want to do a whole video talking about this topic and what makes a fast fashion brand and talking more about the backlash. So let me know if that sounds interesting. And yeah, let's move on to topic number 4. I'm calling this one the unexpected guest at Men's Fashion Week. The unexpected guest being the climate crisis. If you haven't seen all the drama that happened around Men's Paris Fashion Week, then congrats, you had a more offline summer than I did. But you know, viral videos of Paris flooding aside, I think this entire event showed just how unprepared fashion is to deal with the climate crisis, and also how determined they are to ignore all of the warning signs that they need to do something now before it's too late. I did do a whole Substack post on this, but I feel like I can sum up the chaos that I spent a long time describing in just a few examples. Basically, fans waving aggressively in every single shot of Fashion Week you can see, especially in front rows as the models go down in heavy autumn fabrics, and the amount of backstage videos that have assistants and designers trying to cool off the models as they stand there waiting to walk. Some examples are a little bit more fun and lighthearted, like assistants trying to fan away sweat stains, and a couple of them looking really quite worrying, like this TikTok showing 2 models who literally looked like they're going to pass out. Business of Fashion pointed out there are quite a few examples of emergency heat measures being employed for guests at the shows, like cooling towelettes and water being passed out front row. But their coverage also talked about how major fashion companies are telling investors that they don't see the climate crisis as a risk anytime soon. Let's just pause for a minute there and talk about the absurdity of saying there's no risk anytime soon. Because literally the same day there were heat waves in Paris, which caused designers to have to take increasing measures to keep the shows running, there was also flash flooding in the evening, which was called like a biblical flood because of how much water passed through. Literally 2 extreme weather events happening in the same city where most of fashion's C-suite is gathered, and they're still calling it not a risk. Not to mention the massive hypocrisy going on in fashion's supply chain. Earlier in the summer, a viral LinkedIn post shared the working conditions for factory workers in 38-degree heat in India, which actually caused the writer of the post to faint while she was visiting. Her post said that she spoke to the factory managers to try get some cooling measures in place for the workers, even being able to hand out some lemon juice once a day, to which the managers apparently said, "We'll have to discuss it. It could take weeks to approve this." Do you think it took weeks for brands to approve handing out moist towelettes or fans at their fashion shows? Obviously not. Honestly, talking about this one makes me so angry about how blind fashion continues to be about the climate, so maybe it's worth moving on. But TLDR, if fashion continues to put its head in the sand, then climate change is going to be the guest of honor at every major event going forward. Okay, deep breath. Next topic. European recycling is literally about to fall apart. Sorry, I know, bad news back to back, but we do have a positive news section at the end, so hang on. Okay, so a little bit of backstory on this one. We're getting closer to the EU ban on destroying clothes or sending them to landfill or incinerating them, which means big brands are panicking and looking for other ways of getting rid of their stock. And many of them are probably thinking about relying on recycling as an alternative. But this summer has proven that's not going to be an option. Recycling centres across Europe are flooded with too much clothing and they're shutting down because they can't deal with it. The good old French have done what they've done best and protested this by dumping clothes in front of stores. In Sweden, meanwhile, they've already had to go back on this incineration ban because they literally can't deal with the volume of clothing and their systems shut down. And in other areas of Europe, like Romania, illegal dumping sites are just popping up because there's nowhere else for the clothing to go. I think it's worth briefly talking about the massive problem at the center of this news because it is going to be an ongoing problem for the next few years as sustainable legislation comes into place and brands literally scramble to find a way to deal with it. So what's the issue impacting all of these recyclers? Well, there's literally so much to be sorted. Global textile waste hit 120 million tons in 2024. 80% of that was landfilled or incinerated, which won't be an option anymore. There's also the fact that fashion isn't designing for recycling in mind. In fact, a new study found that 98% of clothing was made in a way that blocks recycling. There's also studies that are showing consumers don't know what can and can't be recycled, which clogs up the recycling centres with clothing that shouldn't be there. And then there's the big worry that recycling this clothing isn't financially worth it. This sounds like an impossible problem, but a lot of it can be traced back to the fact that fashion has not been investing in recycling because there's been easier alternatives. But now that those easy alternatives are being banned, there's a chance that fashion will start investing and will be able to create systems that can deal with the waste. The ban is literally right around the corner, 2026. So hopefully things start to progress soon. But I think we'll be hearing a lot about this in the next year. Okay, and finally, the good news section. Thank you if you've watched this far. I hope this is a good reward. There was a lot of mixed news we went through, but hopefully this positive news is a good way to end it. I actually found a post on Instagram that was shared that had a ton of positive climate news, and I'm going to be linking it in the description so you can go and read every single one of them if that's what you want to do. But let's just go through a few of my faves. Like the London River Thames, once declared biologically dead, now having seahorses and seals. Or the fact that Rwanda's reforestation brought back mountain gorillas and boosted ecotourism. It feels like a good one to tie into one of the topics today. Melbourne's urban forests lower city temperatures by 4 degrees Celsius during heat waves. Or this one, Kenya planted 150 million seedlings in a single day, part of a 15 billion tree plan. Like I said, there's tons of examples on here, I think 24, so definitely go watch the post. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was interesting and you feel caught up on fashion, ready for a busy September of fashion weeks and also a return of the monthly news roundups here on this channel that I paused over summer. I'll be getting back into them from September onwards, so make sure you're subscribed and you have notifications turned on so you hear about those. And yeah, I think that's everything we have to say. I hope you have a lovely day and I speak to you soon. Bye.